Okay, I'm officially going to start. Hi, everybody. My name is Tony Berrien. I'm the president of the Hearing Loss Association of America, Mission Viejo Chapter. I just let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded and it will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. If you do not wish to be recorded in the audience, you can sit off to the side and then you won't be in the recording. Okay. I want to make some announcements. We had a walk for hearing event on Saturday. This is an annual event. It happens in Long Beach. I'm going to show you my t-shirt. This year, you know, just like this meeting, the walk is building back after, because pre-pandemic, we used to have a lot of people and we raised a lot more money, but we're building back and we had 300 walkers that were on the walkathon, and we had 29 teams of people. We raised $46,000. Because, and I got a lot of donations from chapter members, which I appreciate. I was able to raise $1,085. And so that got me a t-shirt. And so Marla was there. Marla's our vice president. She was at the walk. She was in charge of the raffle. Herlinda was there at the walk. Yay, Herlinda. And we had a great time. So we did that. And here's a picture of many of the people. It's not everybody, but many people are right here. Okay, in this group picture. Okay, I always say our disclaimer. HLAA does not endorse any single product or service. This meeting is intended to provide information, education, advocacy, and support. We do have a sponsor, not the same as an endorsement exactly. So Caption Call provides landline phones that do captioning, will caption your calls for you. I think it's wonderful when I'm talking to the doctor's office. Many people have accents, which I have difficulty with. And generally speaking, the captioner gets it right. And you can save the transcript of the call. And it will, that will be very helpful for you if you've been provided with instructions that you need to go back and confirm. So it's available for your existing landline network, or you can get an app for your iPhone and your Android. And one of the really great benefits of using the Caption Call app on your smartphone is that it will caption both sides of the conversation, and it will save both sides of the conversation. So not only will you hear the doctor or whoever you're speaking to, but what you say will appear as captions, and you can save that transcript. So it's also available for iPads and tablets. I have a brochure on the table here if you're interested in getting more information. The telephone number to call them toll free is 877-557-2227. Okay. We have a captioner today. This is a live person, a real person, using stenographic equipment. And what happened? Oh, thank you, Alan, for keeping, yeah, gee. Okay. Can you make that full screen? Is there a way to make that full screen? Okay. I have to work on that. Homework, have to figure that out. Anyway, our captioner today is Jo Gale, and she is in her captioning office in Chicago, Illinois. So with the wonders of the internet, she's able to hear me and caption everything that I say and what the presenters will say. So thank you, Jo. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about, see that. Communication accessibility helps communication access helps people with hearing loss the same way that ramps help people with mobility issues. So what do I mean by communication access? First of all, the first communication access feature that we have is captions, so you can see what is being spoken. The secondly is that we have a hearing loop in this room. So you don't see it. It's all around the room, and it requires that you have a t-coil equipped hearing aid, and that hearing aid has to be programmed, and you have to turn it on when you want it. If you have hearing aids now and you don't know if you have a telecoil, I'd like you to pick up this little brochure that's on the table. Up at the top, it says, "Do I have a telecoil?" And there's a little discussion in there about that. And you should go to your audiologist and say, "Do I have a telecoil?" And if you do, ask them to program it for you. It's as simple as that. Then when you come into this room, you can just flip a switch and all the background noise goes away. And you just hear the speaker clearly. Now, if you don't know if you have telecoil or if you don't have hearing aids, you can borrow from the sign-up desk. You can get a receiver. Let me just. Okay. This is what a t-coil looks like. This little copper wire that's in a hearing aid. This is what the copper wire looks like compared to the dime. And this is what a receiver looks like. So basically, it's just a receiver box, and you can borrow our headphones, bring your own earbuds, because they plug in just fine, and you have individual volume control. Turn it on, and you can hear beautifully. Now, what I want you to know is that here in Laguna Woods, we have 10 hearing loops, 10 meeting rooms that have hearing loops. Right now, repairs are being scheduled for Dining Room 2 in Clubhouse 3, and somebody said that the Performing Arts Center needs a tweak. So that's being scheduled. Another good news thing is that we have new installations happening in Clubhouse 5, Monday, July 29th through Friday, August 2nd. So they're installing a hearing loop this summer in Clubhouse 5, Friday, June the 28th, Clubhouse 6, and Clubhouse 1 is going to be fit with a hearing loop during the renovation. So you can thank the Hearing Well Club for getting this all started and getting all this hearing accessibility. Okay. So is there anybody that wants to try a listening device? Ruth has got one. Anybody else? It's a listening device. So if you You see this picture up on the screen? It's just a little box with a headphones, and it shuts out all the background noise in the room, and you can hear the speaker clearer. Would you like to try one? How much are they to buy? Can you buy them locally? Can you buy these locally? And they're only working this year. Oh. Have Bridge help me. Bridge, look at a battery. This gentleman needs some help. Okay, so we're going to have him taken care of. All right. I want to talk about getting social. We have a social event. It's going to happen on June the 22nd, and this is going to be a Newport Harbor cruise and a pizza lunch. And this is being hosted by a group of Hearing Loss Association members that are in, I would say, South Orange County. So that's why they've chosen Newport Harbor. About every other month, we like to have an event. We had a great event last month. You just want to try it. Anyway, so this is another one. We have flyers here. If you'd like to have a flyer and get more information. I thought that was kind of really good. Okay, we'll take care of that in a minute. In any case, it's Saturday, June the 22nd. And it starts meet at the Fun Zone boat at 12:30. Okay, I'm going to move on. We're going to have a meeting in July the 8th. And guess what? I'm going to talk about more personally and more in detail about hearing loops, getting connected, accessibility in Laguna Woods. There are some clubhouse rooms that have devices that are not a hearing loop. It's an FM or radio system. And so you still have to borrow a device. And I'm going to be talking about that and working with you personally to get you connected. So that's next meeting, July the 8th, doors open at 1:30, Clubhouse 7, right here. We are a 501c3 tax exempt chapter, and tax deductions may be available. I noticed that some people put money in the donation box. Thank you very much. But I'm also going to pass around. Alan, where'd you go? You want to do this side? Okay, and collect them when we're done. And Marla, you want to. If you're already donated in the donation box outside, you're not expected to donate anymore, but we appreciate it. Okay, we have a lot of projects that we want to fund, and I would be working on information to bring you over the summer. Okay, I am the president of the HLAA Mission Viejo Chapter, and please feel free to email me or text me 949-391-9756. And I do believe there's cards on the table. I want to get going. All right. All right. All right, we have lots of people. Marla, I think we're ready to introduce our speakers. And I'd like to introduce you to Marla Peoples. She's the vice president of the chapter. And one of the jobs of the vice president, is to introduce the presenters. So there you go.
All right. I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, see if you can get close to that.
Okay. I hope you can hear me okay. Okay, just a little bit. Yes, I used to be the chairperson for the City of Orange chapter of HLAA for about 5 years. And Tony graciously helped so much with that chapter with technical advice. And so now we're kind of doing a little flip session here. And I'm trying to help out here with this chapter now. And we're very happy to see you all here. We have a really good program for you today. We have David Majit, Doctor of Audiology. He completed his master's degree in audiology at the University of Connecticut. You know, the NCAA men's basketball champions in 2023 and 2024, UConn. Who can get away from March Madness? You can't. He received his doctorate for the Arizona School of Health Sciences. He has owned and operated audiology dispensing clinics, has been consulting for leading hearing aid manufacturers for the past 44 years. He's been married for 50 years. Congratulations, that's wonderful. He notes that his better half will not allow him to retire for fear he'll be around too much. And he has been with Oticon, and we're going to be learning a lot about Oticon today. And we also have Chalese Buttars, a regional audiologist for Oticon. In 2019, she started with Oticon as an education and training specialist, working to provide training in CEU education, predominantly for the West region. Prior to joining Oticon, Chalese worked as a director of international programs for a hearing foundation, where she developed educational materials and provided training for hearing care providers overseas. She is an honors graduate for the AUD program at Utah State University. So with that, I'd like to present Dr. David Majit.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's a pleasure to be here. You're missing out on the sun. So to supplement that, there are some muffins and scones back there, and I am going to be passing out a list for cocktail orders for those who would interested. Okay, I would be interested. Anyway, again, I want to thank you, and a special thank you for Tony and Marla for inviting us here. Thank you. You guys do such an awesome job. I just wanted to kind of catch on to what Tony was saying about things like telephone coils. Just to let you know, it's not available yet, but next year sometime, there's something called Bluetooth LE audio or low energy audio that will be available that I won't say will take the place of T-coils, but it's actually the next generation of Bluetooth streaming. And I think Dr. Rodriguez will be able to really kind of clue you in when that's available and all the benefits that'll be coming. And I think Dr. Buttars will also possibly be addressing that as well. Again, as Tony mentioned, please, we'd like this to be as interactive, as informal as possible. So please, any questions, any comments, and I accept all compliments. So really, so whatever you'd like to say and participate, please go ahead and do that. With that said, I'd like to turn the program over to my colleague, Dr. Buttars. Welcome.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for letting us be here today. Dr. Majit and I have had a chance, I think the past 3 or 4 years, to come and present to this chapter of HLAA, and it's been a great experience every time. So thank you so much for giving us some time to talk about Oticon's newest, latest, and greatest technology. Now, I wanted to make it very clear up front that I'm not trying to sell Oticon to you. This really is meant to be educational, so you have an idea of some of the new technology that is out there. But I also want to make sure that we talk about some other things like connectivity. as David and I have done this in the past, connectivity has been something that the majority of people have more questions on. A lot of people want to know about apps and what functionality they have and how can they get more out of, connecting their hearing devices directly to their phones, accessories, things like TV adapters or remote microphones. Tony was talking about accessibility, and those connectivity accessories also can help with connectivity and accessibility of sounds, whether that's at your house or if you have something like a remote microphone that you can take and have a presenter use, or a pastor at church or somebody to be able to have direct access of speech into your hearing devices. And the great thing about accessories is a lot of the hearing aid manufacturers, if not all of them, at least the top kind of 5 that are out there, have accessories that you can utilize. So it's not going to be just Oticon specific information. Now, looking at the agenda that we have planned for you today, I first want to take just a few minutes to talk about listening effort, because I think that's something that's very important to understand, especially with individuals with hearing loss. Why does it take so much more effort if you're at a restaurant or a family party to try to hear and understand and be part of communication? So we're going to talk about that at the beginning. After we get through that, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of Oticon's newest hearing aid technology. Now, I don't want to get too far into the weeds of what we call signal processing, or how the hearing aid is functioning, but we do need to get into it just a little bit for you to understand what has been updated since we came out with the Oticon Real hearing aid. That is the name, Oticon Real, last year. We actually launched a new device called Oticon Intent, and it has a very purposeful name, and we'll get into why that is. And that hearing aid actually launched at the beginning of this year in February. So I'm going to mention what some of those differences are and how we've upgraded technology, and more importantly, what are the benefits for hearing aid users using Intent. After that, as I mentioned already, we will get into connectivity and talk about what types of connectivity is out there. I am going to briefly mention what Dr. Majit was just talking about, which is Bluetooth LE audio, and how that relates to Auracast and the future of that. And then we'll have time for question and answer, or we can also take questions as we go along today, whatever works best for the group that we're in. Now, for those of you who are on Zoom, I know Tony already talked about if you have a question in the crowd, wait until you get the microphone to ask. For those of you on Zoom, if you wouldn't mind putting your questions in the chat box. If you're not familiar with Zoom, if you're using a computer, you should find a chat functionality at the bottom of the screen. If you're using something like a phone, it may look more like this, where you have a little ellipses that says more, and you can tap on that and click chat and send a message. And I'm going to keep my eye on the chat box as we go along today. Now, to get into listening effort, because that's our kind of first step along our agenda today, or along our journey, I actually want to talk about how hearing works in general. When it comes to hearing loss, or how hearing actually works, there is a hierarchy of hearing. First, there's detection. So that's just noticing that a sound is present. There is discrimination. So if somebody plays a bell or dings a bell and somebody bangs on a drum, can you discriminate that there is a difference? You may not be able to know what it is, but can you tell there's a difference? Then there's identification. And that is, if I read a list to you, different body parts on the face, a nose, an ear, an eye, could you hear that and understand what the differences are and repeat them back? And then we have comprehension, where if Dr. Majit said to me, hey, can you go to the store and pick me up my favorite chocolate ice cream, my favorite Haagen-Dazs ice cream, could I then hear that, understand, comprehend, and actually carry that out, or tell him, hey, go get your own ice cream? So there's this hierarchy of hearing that has to happen. Now, when somebody has a hearing loss, that information and that ability to have that hierarchy can sometimes be dampened because you're not getting a complete picture up to your brain. Your ears may pick it up, the outside, the outer ear, your pinna, but as it's going into all the anatomy and through all the physiological processes that hearing takes, it's not getting a complete picture up to your brain. Now, one of the things I always love to bring up in these conversations is how amazing being able to localize sound is. Have you ever thought, how do you know where sound is coming from in space? If I go to a park and a dog is barking on my right side, how do I know it's on my right? Our brains are amazing, and they actually can take different timing differences and loudness differences to know where that dog is coming from. So if it's on my right, it's going to come to my right ear first and be louder on that side as well. And so my brain can clue in and know that it's there. Now, when it comes to all of these processes, when somebody has hearing loss, it makes a lot of these things more difficult. And as a result, if you are in a conversation at a restaurant or a family party, it can make trying to hear and understand much more effort. Now, individuals with normal hearing thresholds or typical hearing thresholds is what we'd call them. Oftentimes, if they go into a restaurant, there's very little effort. It's an effortless thing to be able to hear and be a part of an exchange of conversation. If somebody has a hearing loss, then all of that information that's trying to get up to the brain doesn't necessarily work as it should. Because of that hearing loss, we're not getting a complete picture. Now, what that looks like and how does hearing loss affect the hearing process? If the brain receives a less sound, so if you do have some hearing loss, let's say maybe in the higher frequencies where a lot of clarity of speech, the S's, the F's, the TH's of speech sounds, where the clarity comes from, that's typically where individuals have hearing loss, is where those sounds of speech are. So if the brain gets that information and it's more vowel heavy or low frequency heavy, and you're not getting those higher pitches, you have some of that, but it's not a complete picture. So it makes it harder for your brain to understand what is being said because you don't get the whole sound scene, if you will. Now, as a result of that, you then have to try to guess what the person has said and try to concentrate as hard as you can on what is being said in that environment. And the perfect example is a booth of 4 people at a restaurant, a pretty loud restaurant. It takes a lot of effort and it can be absolutely exhausting by the time you're done hanging out with your friends or your family at that restaurant. Now, one other thing that we know about listening effort in that type of environment is that when your brain is putting so much effort into just trying to understand in that moment, it's taking up brain space or capacity to just try to understand in that moment, and it doesn't allow you to store the information as much as you would like. So if you go home and you're trying to say, hey, I was with my friend Jocelyn today, and Jocelyn was telling me this story, and you're trying to recall the details of that story, sometimes it can be very hard because your brain has used that information or used that process, that energy that it would to store conversations to just try to understand in the moment. So it can be harder to recall and remember conversations later in the day. We also know that by the end of that time that you're hanging out with them, can be absolutely exhausting because of all of that effort you've tried to just put into listening and understanding in that moment. Now, as a result of that, Oticon has tried to do a lot of research looking at things like listening effort and does our technology reduce the amount of effort? And one of the things that we often talk about is something called brain hearing. And the whole idea, and if you look at literature that Oticon puts out, you'll probably see it talk about brain hearing. Now, I know that brain health and cognition is a big thing that everybody is kind of looking at, and it's very important to make sure we're taking as good of health of our brain as possible. So when I started with Oticon about 4.5 years ago, I thought, brain hearing, that's a catchy marketing term, but it's so much more than that. Oticon actually looks at the brain and how is the brain processing sound and how are we as humans processing sound? And when we make hearing devices, how can we try to make sure that our hearing devices are giving as much of a complete sound picture to these individuals who are using these devices as possible? Now, it's incredibly important to understand this about a hearing aid. The technology that goes into a hearing aid is so advanced. It is not simply just a microphone and picking up sound and then amplifying it and making it loud. If it was, you can imagine if you go into a loud restaurant where you're sitting at that booth with 4 different people and the loudness of the restaurant is incredibly loud. You can imagine that if the hearing aid, all it did was pick up sound and make it louder, then that's probably not going to be very helpful. We need the hearing aid to be smart and try to better identify speech and bring out speech, but still give access to the complete sound scene so you can feel like you're part of that environment and not shut down from other people around you. Now, when we look at one of the hearing aid technologies, so there are many features in a hearing aid, and we're not going to get too far into these today, but to give you an example, this one that we're going to talk about is called directionality, and it is one of the most important hearing aid features to be able to try to pick up speech and bring down noise in an environment. Because again, hearing aids don't simply pick up everything and make it louder. There is a lot of processing that goes in. Once the sound goes into a hearing aid microphone, the hearing aid then looks at it, analyzes it, and tries to bring out speech and bring down noise so you can better understand in that environment. And one of those key features is called directionality. Now, directionality has been around in hearing aids since probably the late 60s or early 70s. And what it was meant to do is take in an environment like you see on the screen. There's a gentleman here with hearing loss using hearing devices, sitting around a table, and it's a noisy environment, and there are a number of people. He's trying to better hear and understand what it is that they are saying. Now, what traditional directionality has done for years and years is basically the hearing aids will say, okay, this environment is starting to get loud. It's a noisy environment, and the hearing aid can measure that. It says this environment is getting loud. This person is probably having a harder time hearing and understanding. So we're going to try to focus the microphones and only really pick up what is coming from in front of the listener. And that is what this is kind of trying to signify or notify here, is that those microphones are picking up what is that person looking at. Now, this can work really well if you're in a one-on-one conversation and there's no noise happening behind that person. You're just trying to talk to one person. It is picking that person up and trying to cut down everything else around. Now, usually when I talk about this technology, people are like, yeah, that sounds good. I want to be able to hear and focus on the person that I'm looking at. Now, that can be the case, but what if we go back to that 4-person in a booth situation? I'm talking to David. He's sitting across from me. There's somebody next to him, and there's somebody next to me. If my hearing aid is using a directional microphone as it is here for traditional directionality, and all of a sudden somebody talks to my right, and I don't look at them quickly enough, or I maybe miss the first part of what they say. So looking at that, Oticon a number of years ago thought, how can we give better access to the full sound scene and not just amplify everything, because we know that doesn't work, but how can we make our hearing aid quick enough and smart enough to identify specific voices that are coming from around the patient and still pick those up. But then if there are any sources of noise, make the hearing aid smart enough to identify that's noise and to bring it down. And so Oticon's philosophy of brain hearing is truly all about how can we make the hearing aid smart enough to be able to give access to as full of a sound scene as possible, so we're not cutting people off from individuals around them. But if we give them access to all of the speech that's coming from around them, they can have what we call selective attention. That ability, as the conversation goes along and there's turn taking at that 4-person booth, you're not going to be cut off. If there's clear, distinct patterns of speech, you'll have access to that speech. So you can hear and be a part of conversation. Or if a waiter comes up to your table or a waitress, you'll be able to hear them as they're talking and hopefully not miss anything as you get time to try to look at them. And so Oticon's whole philosophy, and one of the things we're very well known for, is this concept of keeping that sound scene open to try to give you as much access, but still have the hearing aid be smart enough to know if it's speech, to preserve it, and if it's noise, to go ahead and reduce it. Now, this is just one of the key hearing aid processing features. There are other features that are in hearing aids as well, things called noise reduction. If there is a noise all around you, like an HVAC system that's maybe coming over your head, a directional system can't really cut that down effectively because it's all around you. And so a noise reduction system in the hearing aid can identify that kind of steady state noise and try to pull that down and again, help preserve speech. So those are a couple of features that are in modern day hearing aids, and they're done differently from manufacturer to manufacturer. Now, when we look at Oticon Intent, Oticon Intent, as I mentioned at the beginning, launched in February of this year. So it's been on the market for about 3 to 4 months at this point in time. Now, last year, we came out with a hearing aid called Oticon Real. And Oticon Real was a really great hearing aid and that helped to improve upon transient noise management. And if you're not sure what that is, I'm sure many of you, if you've worn hearing devices or some type of hearing assistive technology, have maybe been around a loud, sudden sound that was very uncomfortable, like a door slamming or dishes in a sink clanking against each other. And those can get really loud and uncomfortable. Now, most modern day hearing aids have the ability to actually identify a kind of sudden impact sound and take that sound down before it becomes uncomfortable for you. So if that's something that you're struggling with your hearing aid technology, that's definitely something you should talk to your provider about to see if it's something that they can help with. The Oticon Real did that in a better, more effective way than anything we had in the past. Oticon Real also came out with a better wind noise management system. Now, in California, you're very lucky. I'm from Utah. We don't really have many beaches here, as you can probably imagine. We're not out walking in a beach type of environment, and I don't get a lot of wind where I'm at either. But I know in California, that can definitely happen. If you're outside walking and there's wind noise that's present, many of you have probably experienced the wind hitting the microphone and causing this artifact, this kind of whooshing wind noise. And that can be really annoying and overwhelming and uncomfortable. And so one of the things that Oticon Real did, that came out last year, was improving upon the wind noise management system to be able to better identify if there's wind noise and bring that down, but also preserve speech at the same time. Because if we identified there's wind and just bring it down and turn the volume down, if you're in the middle of talking to somebody as you're walking on the beach, that's not going to be helpful because you still need access to speech. And so that was something that the Oticon Real also improved upon. So when we look at the Oticon Intent, which again launched this year, the Oticon Intent has that transient, that sudden sound improvement. It has that wind noise improvement, but we've improved upon it in another way as well. And that's what I want to talk about for the next few minutes. So looking at the Oticon Intent, the name was very intentional. With the Oticon Intent, it is going to better understand your intentions or what you're trying to do within the environment that you are in. And that is something that we would kind of call or goes along the lines of precision medicine. Now, what does that mean? When we look at precision medicine, that is how can we give the right treatment to the right patient or the right person at the right time? Now, up until this time, with the Oticon Real or any hearing aid that came before, what that hearing aid would do is, if you were wearing, let's say, the Oticon Real, and you went into a restaurant, the Oticon Real would be looking at the environment, and it would be looking at how loud is the background noise of that restaurant, and it would also look at something called the signal-to-noise ratio. If you're not familiar with the signal-to-noise ratio, that is, how much is the speech or the signal rising above the background noise? So if I'm having a conversation with somebody, how loud is their voice compared to all of the background noise in the environment? And that is the signal-to-noise ratio. If we're in an environment, we want speech to be louder than the noise. We want a better signal-to-noise ratio, higher signal-to-noise ratio, because that means that speech is a lot louder than the background noise. Now, what the Real, again, to go back, was doing was when you went into an environment, the hearing aid would look at how loud is the environment and how well is speech coming out, popping out of what you're trying to listen to. Now, what the Real did not do is look at what you were doing with that in that environment. If I go to a restaurant and you go to a restaurant and David and Tony are at the restaurant, we may be doing different things at that restaurant. One of us may be walking around trying to navigate the room, looking for our friend that we're meeting up with. One of us may be in a one-on-one conversation where we really need to be able to hear speech. And one of us may be in a group conversation where we need to make sure that we have access to everybody who's sitting at our table. Now, considering that not everybody is doing the same thing at the same time, here's where this precision medicine comes into play. With the Oticon Intent, there is new technology inside, one of which is called an accelerometer. If you've heard of an accelerometer, they're used in many different things today, like maybe a step counter or a watch, that kind of thing. And an accelerometer, specifically in our Oticon Intent, can actually pick up body movement. So are you walking or are you running? It can look at head movement. So are you fixed in a one-on-one conversation? Are you looking around in a group conversation? Or are you walking and looking around, potentially trying to navigate a room? Along with that, it also looks at the loudness of the background noise. And the last thing it can do is measure to see if there's an ongoing conversation in the front half of where you are. So kind of to the front and to the sides. Now, with those 4 pieces of information, again, body movement, head movement, conversation, activity, and the environment, the hearing aid can now better understand what your intentions are and what you're trying to do in that environment. And so what it can do is either give more help from the hearing aid. So we talked a little bit about directionality, and I talked a little bit about noise reduction. So if there's kind of like an HVAC system or the overall hum of a restaurant, that all of these kind of 4 factors are fed into the hearing aid. And so the hearing aid knows how aggressive it needs to be and how much help you need. Do you need more help in that moment from the hearing aid, or do you need less help in that moment from the hearing aid? Because we do not want to over-process the sound scene. We don't want to take away too much from you so you don't have access if that's not what you need at that moment. Now, one of the great things about this technology is that it can be personalized to you. And this is one of the first things I really want to stress, that regardless of what hearing aid you have, whether it's Oticon or another manufacturer, personalization of that hearing aid to you is critical. You could have the best hearing aid in the world, millions and millions of dollars of a hearing aid, and if it's not fit appropriately to you, then it's not going to work very well. If you have a hearing aid that is personalized to your needs, that is going to be the best hearing aid for you. Now, when we look at the Oticon Intent and talk about some research behind this, there was one study that was done that was very interesting. We had to kind of think outside of the box, because when we do studies, they're usually kind of somebody who's just very situated. Oftentimes we'll even use mannequins that are not moving. But as I just mentioned, part of what the intent is doing is measuring movement. And so for this study, they actually used VR goggles, and you can see a test participant set up like that. They had a number of different speakers in front of this individual who was doing this test, and there were about 15 avatars or kind of fake people in this virtual reality. There were 4 that were talking at any one time, and the individual was told that there was a specific topic they were supposed to listen for. And so they could actually move around in their seat and look at these individuals and try to pick out the topic. So let's say they were talking about going to a restaurant. So this individual, this test participant, would have to look around in the VR until they found who was talking about that restaurant. And then they would have to listen to them for about 30 seconds. And then after that, they were asked a question, a comprehension question. And what we found was when we had the 4D sensor technology on, so we're looking at head movement, body movement, conversation activity, compared to when that 4D sensor technology was off, so we weren't looking at any of those factors, there was a 15% improvement in the comprehension of what that individual understood based on those avatars talking. So we know that with those sensors, it helped to be able to support better comprehension within this specific test and study. Now, one of the other studies we did that was very important, because the Oticon Reel just came out last year, and so intent is pretty new, considering that oftentimes we only come out with something every 2 years. So this came out quite quickly on the heels of the Oticon Reel. So we also did a comparison of Oticon Reel compared to the Oticon Intent. And what they did is they had 25 test participants that had mild to moderate hearing loss sit in a sound booth that had speakers all around this person. And in this sound booth, they can recreate environments and try to be as real to life as possible. And they played 6 different sound scenes. One was a forest, one was speech and noise, speech and quiet, and a number of other different sound scenes it was recreating. And they wanted to look at 3 things: sound quality, the nuance of the sound scene, so how detailed was it, and then listening comfort. And what they did is they brought these 25 test participants in, they had them wear the Oticon Reel and listen in these environments, and then judge on a scale what they thought about these 3 factors. And then they had them wear the Oticon Intent. Now, it was a blind study for the participants. They didn't know which one they were wearing. And with the Oticon Intent, the new device, they found that there was 10% better sound quality, 13% more nuance of the sound scene, and then 10% higher or better listening comfort compared to the Oticon Reel that had come out last year. Now, when looking at the Oticon Intent, there are a number of other benefits that we have, one of which we're going to talk about in just a moment, that has to do with connectivity, like the Bluetooth LE audio that David mentioned, and then also something called tap control, which we'll talk about in just a moment. The last thing that I wanted to mention about the Oticon Intent is it does come in a number of different color options. We even have this really cool sky blue option now available that is new. And it does come as a rechargeable hearing aid option, a receiver in the ear rechargeable option. Now, looking at some of the technology or some of the connectivity, so moving on from the hearing aid technology and the new Intent, we do have some great connectivity options, as many other manufacturers have as well. Number one, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, we have the capability to connect hearing aids directly to certain phones. So if you need to take a phone call, or if you like to listen to music from your phone, from Spotify or YouTube, then you can basically pair your hearing aids directly to your phone. Now, I imagine many of you have that technology and utilize that technology day to day. Not all phones are compatible, but many of the newer phones that are out there, even older phones, if we look at iPhone, for instance, that compatibility is even greater in many cases than Android phones. But you do have the ability to connect your hearing aids directly to your phone in order to stream and have that direct access that can help improve that signal to noise ratio that we were talking about, being able to hear the signal you want over noise in your environment.
Chalese, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second.
Yeah, please do.
I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, get everyone engaged. How many of you are presently wearing hearing aids? Okay, so the vast majority of you. How many of you who are wearing hearing aids use the streaming function on their phone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android? And do you find that helpful? Okay, good. Okay, the other thing I did want to address, and just will really emphasize that Dr. Buttars had mentioned, is that, you know, the hearing aids keep getting better and better. There's no question about that. What I saw in the field 40 years ago does not come close to what it is today. However, no matter how great a hearing aid is, as Dr. Buttars mentioned, you could spend $1 million on a hearing aid. We're still dealing with a defective system. So nothing is going to be perfect. And personalizing that response is so important. We could take 10 of you with the same exact hearing loss, and each of you are going to prefer something different. We cannot one size fits all, especially when it comes to your hearing. Your situations are different, your preferences are different. And I say that because, again, no matter how good the hearing aid is, it really depends on the professional that you're seeing. The professional makes all the difference. It's not something that they order and just hand to you. As you know, if you've all gone through this process, or most of you have, it's really important to see someone who has the experience and the knowledge and the expertise to really maximize the benefit. And it does take some time to get used to a hearing aid, whether it's a new user or someone who's been wearing one type of hearing aid and then upgrades to a different instrument. Your brain needs time to get used to all the new information and how the processing is working. And that's why in California, there's a 45-day trial period. It's not something you're buying that day when you get the hearing aids. You have 45 days to evaluate it. Okay, with that said, Dr. Buttars?
Thank you. We actually did have a question in the chat box, so I want to look at that now. The question was, I use Phonak and purchased a microphone hoping it would help in a theater setting and or in a crowded room sitting across the table from others, and it didn't work in either location, and I've shipped it back for a refund. What should a mini mic be able to do? That is a great question. And it depends on the purpose of the mini mic or of the accessory you're using. So I'm not familiar with Phonak accessories specifically, but if we looked, and I'm going to skip a couple slides and then I'll come back. But if we looked at Oticon's accessories, for instance, and all of the accessories that Oticon has, another manufacturer doesn't necessarily have, but some manufacturers may have accessories that Oticon doesn't necessarily have. So that's why it's important to talk to your provider about where you're struggling, and then they can look at what your manufacturer has in terms of connectivity options to try to suggest something for you that would work. But when you talk about a mini mic, in my mind, that would maybe be what we call a remote microphone. And a remote microphone is a general term that would be the same pretty much across any manufacturer. And that is the capability to be able to take this small device and give it to somebody, and they can clip it on their shirt. And that device has a microphone, and it's meant to pick up a person's voice and then send that via Bluetooth or some other type of digitally modulated technology to the hearing aids of somebody. So again, you have direct access. It's kind of a similar concept to a t-coil in that you have somebody speaking into a transmitter. The transmitter is then sent to a receiver, which is your hearing aid, and it is meant to make sure you have the best access to speech possible because it is a direct input into your hearing devices. So in the case that you talk about a theater setting or a crowded room, I don't know that a remote microphone would be the most appropriate option for that, a theater setting. If they had a t-coil, that would maybe be the most appropriate option in that specific theater. If the theater was just doing kind of like a monologue and somebody was willing to wear the remote mic, then that would help. But a remote mic is more of like a one-on-one type of situation. So when we look at Oticon's Connect Clip, it's called a Connect Clip. That's our kind of fancy marketing way of saying that. That's what our device is called, and it can function as a remote mic, where you can take it, give it to somebody, and they can speak into it and have it stream directly. We also have something called an EduMic, where the EduMic can be nice because the Connect Clip is only a one-to-one option. So if somebody was speaking into it, it would only be able to stream to one set of hearing aids. Whereas the EduMic can actually go to one-to-many. So if you had friends that you were going to, let's say, a presentation like this together, and if I was there in person and you had 5 people wearing Oticon hearing aids, you could give the EduMic to me, I could put it on, and that could transmit to all 5 individuals' hearing aids. So you have that direct access, that direct input. There's also something called a TV adapter, which is probably one of the most popular accessories, I would guess, from the majority of manufacturers. And what this is if you've ever been in an environment where somebody is watching the TV louder than what you're comfortable with, that can happen a lot, especially for individuals with hearing loss. They may want it a little bit louder. So the TV adapter is a small box that can hook into your TV and stream information from the TV directly into the hearing aids, and everybody else in the room can watch the TV at a comfortable volume. So as it's streaming into your hearing aids, you can basically determine the volume you want, and everyone else can use the regular TV volume at whatever setting they want. And then we also have something called a remote control, and the majority of other manufacturers would have that capability as well. Not everybody has a smartphone and wants to use a hearing aid app. I'm going to go back and talk about hearing aid apps in just a second. But hearing aid apps can be really nice if you have a smartphone, if you're pretty well at being able to use the smartphone, and if you want to. But not everybody wants to be connected to their smartphone. And so for some individuals, a simple remote control that can change volume, that can mute, that can change programs, can be a really helpful tool for those individuals. And that is what our remote control can do. Now, going back and talking just briefly, and if any of you have questions about accessories, please feel free to ask David or put them here in the chat box. Accessories can be really great. And I actually had a poll question. So I'm going to ask this here. And if you're in the room, maybe you can raise your hand if you feel comfortable. If you're on Zoom, you can put a message in the chat box if you feel comfortable. The question is, if you use hearing devices, do you use an app to control your hearing device volume, programs, etc.? Yes or no? So do you use an app to control your hearing aids? Yes or no? And David, I can't see the room, so maybe if you could kind of pop up here and just tell me, what does it look like in the crowd? And again, if you're on.
Thank you. I will certainly do that. Yeah, if you could just raise your hand for those who are using their app to change volume and to change programs. It looks like the majority, not everyone, but the majority are using their app, which is great.
Okay, great. So most manufacturers, I would say almost if not all of the top manufacturers that are out there have an app. And that app is typically free, which is a really nice kind of secondary thing that you can use. Now, many of your hearing aids have onboard controls. And those onboard controls are buttons, so you can change program and volume if you need to, but it's not easy for everybody to do that. Sometimes it can be hard to find. If you have any dexterity issues or lack of feeling in your fingers, it can be really hard to try to find those buttons and change programs or volumes as you need. And so on the app, you have capability to do that. So when we look at kind of some app functionality, specifically with Oticon, you have the capability to increase the volume or decrease it. If you do have extra programs in your hearing aid, You can go from one program to another to be able to make those changes as needed, depending on what program you're trying to use. And then you also have capability as well on Oticon's app to be able to change the low frequency or mid frequency or high to kind of tailor how that sounds for you. And a number of other things. There's a Find My Hearing Aids functionality. So if you happen to maybe get out of the car and you accidentally bumped off your hearing aid and you walked away and forgot about it, our app can tell you where was the last place that your hearing aid was connected. So if your hearing aid dropped connection as it dropped off of your ear at a restaurant parking lot, it's going to show you that that was the last place it was connected. So there are lots of great features with different hearing aid apps that can help you to support your needs when you wear hearing devices. Now, one thing I will say, though, about Oticon's philosophy is we want you to not have to live in your app. We want the hearing aid to be as smart as possible, so you don't have to go into the app and change volume and to change programs all of the time. It's there if you need it and if you want it, but ideally, we would want our hearing aids to be able to allow you to just kind of set it and forget it. Wake up in the morning, put it on, go about your day, and at night, take them off and put them in the charger if they're rechargeable. Okay, I have another question on here that I want to address. And David, if there are any questions in the room, maybe we could pass around a microphone. The question in the chat says, I guess I was expecting it to do something it wasn't capable of doing. Even in the restaurant mode, if I wanted to use the mic mode, I had to take it off restaurant, which left me with so much surround sound that I could hear the person speaking into the mic. Yeah, so that's a hard situation, especially if you were expecting it, to do something very specific in your environment and it didn't do that. So if you haven't followed up with your provider, I would recommend following up with them to just talk to them very specifically about what you want the device to do. The more specific information you can give, the more specifically they can look to see if there is an accessory or if there is something else that's out there that can maybe help you do exactly what it is that you're looking for. Now, even outside of accessories, let's say that you're having a hard time hearing in a restaurant. The more specific information you can give to your provider to tell them what you're struggling with, what does the setup look like? Where are you sitting? Where are the individuals sitting that you're struggling with? How loud is that environment? Is it hard surfaces? Is there a lot of reverberation? As much information as you can give your provider, they can then listen to that and then try to fine-tune the hearing aids in the hearing aid software. So maybe you don't need a secondary device or an accessory. But just as somebody who helps oftentimes with what we call patient assists, if a provider is not sure what to do and they want a second set of eyes, they bring me in. And when individuals give me a lot of good information and details about where they're struggling and what's happening and what the situation looks like, I'm able to give a lot more help and more guidance into how can we fine-tune that hearing aid to really personalize it to your needs at that time. Now, those were the main topics that I wanted to discuss. I know we're out of time if we were planning on going for the hour-long period today. Are there any other specific information or specific questions or information that you're looking for from us today?
Right. Any questions here in the room? The people online have submitted their questions in chat. So, David, you want to come up here and field any questions?
I have a question while David's coming up. If I have Oticon hearing aids and 3 years go by, could I upgrade them and get something off for an upgrade pair?
Good question. Did everyone hear the question? Good. Basically, I'll just repeat it. If you've purchased an Oticon or been fit with an Oticon hearing aid and down the road new technology comes out and you want to be able to upgrade, is there any value, if I understand you correctly, to the older hearing aids that you're wearing. Unfortunately, yes and no. A hearing aid office is not allowed to really resell a used hearing aid. And so they can't do anything with it except maybe use it as a loaner. So two things that one can do is, number one, I think most professionals will always recommend, depending on the severity of the hearing loss, to have a backup set of hearing aids, just like people may have two sets of glasses. That's number one. And that hearing aid set is going to be more valuable to you than it will be to someone else. But there are also some offices that will have what they call an upgrade program. And so they will give some value, some trade-in value, if indeed you don't want to hold on to your hearing aids, but wanted to kind of give them in. So the office wouldn't be able to resell those hearing aids, but they could use them as loaners. If someone's hearing aids go out, they can loan the hearing aids to them, or they can donate them. And you can get value if you donate to places like the Lions Club or other organizations. You can take a tax write-off on that. So, but unfortunately, kind of like glasses, they're really designed for the individual. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am, back there.
I guess with the new, with the newer versions of the hearing aids, I would imagine the cost has also gone up.
It depends. I don't think the cost is going up from year to year, but if you look at what was purchased maybe 5-6 years ago to now, yes, the cost is probably going up. And I'm glad you brought up the whole idea of cost. People will look at hearing aids and say, why is this costing me thousands of dollars? It doesn't look like it should cost thousands of dollars. And you're right, the materials in the hearing aids do not cost thousands of dollars. But the research that Dr. Buttars talked about cost hundreds of millions of dollars to develop this new technology and incorporate it into a very small device. And that's really what you're paying for, not the hearing aid itself, but the research, the cost of the research that's gone into the building that hearing aid. Ma'am, I'm sorry, you had a question.
Wondering, she had mentioned that there were the top 5 manufacturers, whereas the Oticon sounds fabulous. Who are the other 4?
There are 5 major manufacturers. Actually, 3 of them are from Denmark. Oticon is manufactured in Denmark. A company called GN Resound is manufactured in Denmark, and another company called Widex is manufactured in Denmark. Phonak, which Dr. Buttars had mentioned, they're a Swiss company out of Switzerland. And then you have one American company called Starkey. So those are the 5 major companies. You do have a few smaller companies around that manufacture. When I first got into this business, there were probably 30 or 40 American manufacturers. But to keep up with technology and the investments that it took, most of those companies went out of business. So those are the 5 major companies. Yes, ma'am.
With the the federal government passed a bill that hearing aids are supposed to be reasonable for seniors, and yet, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the hearing aid industry.
Yeah.
But I say, what's going on with that program?
Sure. Well, what the government passed just about 2 years ago is to make hearing aids more affordable for those people who couldn't afford the higher price. They came out with something called over-the-counter hearing aids. That's something that, like, basically you'd get in a drugstore, Walmart, a Costco, where you go in and you don't have a professional helping to fit. You just buy it over the counter and you put it in your ear. So, and those can be, for a pair, they can range anywhere from $500 to $2,500. The issue is that most people don't find that it's been adequate for what their needs are. As we were talking, it's like picking up a pair of glasses that's not write for your prescription, but even more so with hearing aids, it's not just the prescription, it's basically the programming that's so important. So yes, there are cheaper alternatives or less expensive alternatives called over-the-counter hearing aids, and you can get them not at a professional's office, but you can get them at these larger places, as I mentioned, like Walmart. So far, they haven't really found a home, because if you look statistically, there are about 1% of all hearing aids sold over the last couple of years have been the over-the-counter, because people, when they get something like hearing aids, they want them to perform as much as possible for what their needs are, and that just hasn't been the case. But some people have done reasonably okay with that. So I wouldn't say that you shouldn't explore that, but I think for most people, they've been very disappointed in that because you're just buying it over the counter. I don't know if that answers your question. But hearing aids, there are many different levels of hearing aids. Usually have 4 or 5 pricing levels. The higher the technology, the more expensive it's going to be. But you can get very good hearing aids at lower technology that aren't nearly as expensive. Yes, ma'am. Marla?
Don't you also have to consider the degree of hearing loss?
Yeah, there are a number of things that you do need to consider, and thank you for bringing that very important point. If you have a very mild hearing loss and you just need some amplification just to make things louder to make it easier for you, the over-the-counter might suffice for you what your needs are. But if your hearing loss is really one of a degree, a much larger loudness loss, but even more important, a much more problem with clarity or understanding, especially in noisy environments, then those things usually don't suffice. But I wouldn't discourage people from trying them. It's just that, as I say, most people have been disappointed. Sir?
What about insurance?
Okay, there's something called managed care. Usually it's Medicare Advantage. I don't know how many of you have Medicare Advantage programs? Okay, so Medicare Advantage, if you have a program, many times, or at least sometimes, the insurance company that you're working with works with what we call a managed care company, a secondary company that will provide some benefit for hearing aids, where it may make it a little less expensive. The only issue with that is usually the hearing aids that they have available are not quite adequate for many people's needs. So that's something I would say, if you went to your professional, I don't know if for those of you who have hearing aids, you're probably already dealing with a provider. I would talk to them about it and see, and usually there'll be some kind of program which they can help you out with as far as cost goes, especially if you have a managed care program. But yeah, it's something you should check as far as insurances go. Any other questions? Well, you've been a great group again. We really appreciate it. I know this is not the most stimulating discussion to have. We really appreciate your attention. We appreciate the questions. Yes, ma'am.
Just curious.
Yes.
I have hearing loss, complete loss in one ear.
Okay.
Does that mean that I'd be getting half if I got a hearing aid for the ear that is?
Yeah. Not knowing exactly what your hearing is like, if a person does have complete loss in one ear that can't be amplified, there's something we call a bicross, meaning that if there's obviously less of a loss on the other side, they can wear a hearing aid, and then they wear just a microphone over the ear that doesn't amplify that dead ear because it won't do any good, but it brings the sound over from that side to the better ear, and so they can hear significantly better than just hearing from one side. So there is something that could help, but again, I always say to people, you have to judge the value of what you're spending to the benefit of what you're getting. And that's why it's so important that you should never go into an office and just pay for hearing aids and walk out and not go back again. You should always take advantage of that 45-day trial period, so you don't just try something in someone's office, and it may sound great there, but the test is how it does in your own environments. And that's why it's so important to really try a hearing aid out in your different situations before you make a decision. And that's really key. Sir.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment on the 45-day. It's really imperative that you use that time and keep going back during that time, because the California law is, if you just put it on and don't come back for your repeated visits, they don't have to return your money. They changed that law about 3 years ago because there's an adjustment period. And part of the time is that so that you can work with your professional back and forth. These are very customized to you. And if you don't give the professional that courtesy of allowing them to adjust them well for you, to get them really dialed into you, they don't actually have to give your money back.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions? Again, I want to thank you, and again, thank Tony and thank Marla, and thank you, Dr. Buttars, for I thought an excellent presentation. So appreciate it, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tony.
Oh, good. You're back. Yes, thank you so much. So if we've concluded with the questions, thank you so much for coming. Please consider coming back July the 8th, the same time. Doors open at 1:30. Have some coffee and a cookie. Meeting starts at 2 o'clock, and I'll be talking about hearing accessibility, primarily here in Laguna Woods, but also in your local churches, synagogues, and some of the theaters that we have in our community. So let you know how you can hear better in those places. So be sure and email me if you have any questions. Happy to talk to you anytime, as Ruth can attest. I do answer emails. So, okay, somebody talking? Okay. So thank you very much.
Bye, Tony. Thank you.
Chalese, thank you so much.
Thank you. See you.
All right. And thank you, Joe, for your captioning. All right.